George is my favourite. I know it might not be popular, like Richie will go down as one of the greatest.
Best player you've played with?
Yeah, I think so.
And Eddie walked over to me, you probably be able to do the accent well. Really, mate? It's just the warm-up. What's wrong with you? And I was thinking, yeah, I don't know. I don't know I'm going to last. I thought I was going to chew it up and spit out.
I got Drew to come to Toulon, Drew Mitchell, and he'd not touched many weights. He got over there and he failed on 70 kilos, the bench press. And the Toulon boys were looking at me going, are you, who is this guy that you brought over? I said, "Oh, just give him a bit of time, please, he'll get to shape." Anyway, he got there.
What did you get up to?
I don't know, 75. No.
You can't miss, you're doing them dirty here.
William, Matthew, great to be here today
Thomas.
for
Tomasi.
our first episode that we've done. So first off, let's have a little chat between the two of you about how you first came into contact with one another.
I think I played against Gits, 2006. It was a trial game leading into the 2007 Super Rugby season.
Would have been the start of 2007.
Start of 2007,
Yep.
yeah, sorry. Made a nice little line break and ended up getting caught behind by this.
I ran him down.
He ran me down.
So he looked fast in the warm-up, but he wasn't that fast. It was probably later in the game, though.
Yeah, later in the game. I come off the bench. I was sitting on the bench around that time. But I think
So you were fresh.
Yeah, I was fresh.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Okay.
But the first time I met him was Wallaby camp, actually, in 2009. I walked up there, walked in the team room, and then I remember seeing George Smith, Rocky Elsom, Sterling Mortlock, and Gits was in there as well. And yeah, just end up saying, "Hey mate, how are you?" Bit nervous, didn't feel like saying too much, but yeah, that was the first time I'd met him.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was trying to make Willie feel as comfortable as possible. So we were roomed together, just asking a lot of questions, telling him a lot about myself. Yeah, just trying to break down those barriers. Because I remember when I first came in, how important that was, you know, to feel comfortable and relaxed and like you belong in that environment. Because that's probably the biggest thing that most players go through, is trying to get that sense of belonging and feel that you can play at test level.
I remember being your roomie that time. I remember we both lying in bed. I think it was in between a session, in between sessions. And I remember you looked over to me and we were lying in bed and you go, "Oi, let's vault." I remember thinking to myself, what the fuck does vault mean? And then it just ended up being like talking through life experiences, things you'd been through. I remember telling me some of your stories about traveling and things like that. I remember, I haven't told you this, but like, I remember thinking in my head, like, I've got to make something up here so that I at least sound interesting. This bloke's travelled all over the world, played in these big test matches, and I mean, to what he was saying, yeah, like he was very good for me as far as, you know, making me feel comfortable, but also directly and indirectly being a teacher, you know, learning good habits of, you know, the senior players within the squad. And, you know, I was very grateful to be able to walk into a team with guys like him in the group.
Yeah, let's talk about sort of your history then, I guess, before we get on to Matt's. So you're obviously an Australian icon, but you didn't grow up, your formative years weren't in Australia.
Yeah, I was born in Papua New Guinea and I grew up there. I didn't move over until I was 12 years old for school. Loved my time there. Like growing up there is all about family. You know, you spend a lot of your time with your extended family, and so someone who loved sport at that stage, we played a lot of sport. We hung out a lot together, and you build that competitive edge. I didn't play any actual competitive sport because we used to go to church every Saturday, and our religion being Seventh-day Adventists at the time, from Friday 6 p.m. to Saturday 6 p.m. you can't do anything. So you weren't involved in any sports, whether it was soccer, cricket, rugby, or whatever on weekends. And so
What do you mean you can't do anything? What, you just hang together, have like dinner?
Well, they call it a Sabbath, right? So it's like that you rest. You're meant to rest at that point. Like God created the earth, the heavens and the earth in 7 days, rest on the seventh day. So the belief is that from Friday 6 p.m. to Saturday 6 p.m. you rest. And so every Saturday until I was 12, from Friday 6 p.m. to Saturday 6 p.m, you didn't do anything except go to church on Saturday from 9 to 12. And I remember as a kid, you'd try to sneak out and like play cricket and that, and my parents would be like, "Hey, get back in here, can't do nothing."
And by nothing, like lie in bed, just sleep.
Bro, just sit there. Just sit there, and then like you can watch like they got to a point where they knew we're kids, so like you want to watch TV. So that instead of putting normal TV, they'd buy like videos of like Bible stories, and you'd put it on. So you'd be sitting there watching Bible stories. But no, I got a lot of my enjoyment and like you know, fun in terms of sports. Like my dad built us like a basketball court in our backyard, and
League's huge in Papua New Guinea, yeah.
It's honestly, it's like a religion. Like, But yeah, I never knew rugby as a game existed until I went to Brisbane Boys College in Brisbane when I was 12.
What's it like for you if you go back to Papua New Guinea? Are you as celebrated as, say, is it Marcus Bai? Was he the winger
Yeah.
that was playing for the Storm? And you've got Olam now at the Storm. Like these guys, they're big names like gods when they go back. Is it similar for you when you go back?
I mean, around the time, say, when we won the competition with the Reds in 2011, yeah, it was similar. Like, you get recognised every now and then. But even when I go back now, you get recognised, every so often. Someone might want to take a photo or whatever, but not to the level of those guys.
Yeah.
Because rugby league it's free to air, and again, it's like they just love it.
It's
like
their sport.
It's their sport.
Yeah.
It's a national sport, and to see those guys participating in it like that, mate, those guys are huge back home. Huge. They're almost godlike.
So your years, you obviously started playing rugby with Brisbane, ended up at the Reds, and I think your first season there you would have had Eddie Jones as your coach.
Yeah, like when I moved to the Reds, like I didn't get picked up anything outside of school, so I was fortunate that I played Aussie 19s at the beginning of the year in 2006, only because the two Australian schoolboys halfbacks from the year before both broke their legs. I think one broke their ankle and the other one broke their leg. So I got called in as a late trial player for that squad. Ended up playing well there. Well, not playing well. I played, I think, 60 minutes out of the entire tournament as a bench halfback. But later in the year, I played Queensland 19s and played well there. And Eddie just happened to be watching one of the games, and Sam Cordinley got injured at that stage. And so he just said, look, come train with the top squad. And that was my introduction to professional footy. I remember being buggered in the warm-up. And Eddie walked over to me, you'd probably be able to do the accent well. Really, mate? It's just the warm-up. What's wrong with you? And I was thinking, I don't know. I don't know I'm going to last. I thought I was going to chew it up and spit out.
And I mean, what was that relationship like with Eddie in that first year, basically?
I loved it. Like, I was a sort of person that, because I was never thought of as being anything special, or I wasn't ever going to make it, not a schoolboy sensation, I just always wanted to prove people wrong. And so Eddie was the type of person that would push you and push you and push you. He was big on extras, big on skills, big on developing good habits around the game, and essentially, like, he encouraged you to live the game, live and breathe it. Watch Free Dupree. What's he doing? What can you learn off him? Did you do the extra passing today? Did you do extra kicking? And so I love that. I craved that that knowledge and that the things that he could help me with. And like, he was tough on us for sure, but he was the best thing for me to start my footy career.
Did you, when you were there, and you were obviously a young guy, and you would have been chatting to the older guys, do you know if they shared sort of a similar perception of him?
He was a lot harder on the older players, a lot harder. Like, he treated myself and Quaid and a couple of the younger boys tough, but in a way that he was like moulding us. So he was a bit like, he'd push you, then he'd sort of bring you in a bit, push you, bring you in a bit, and try to teach you. Whereas I think with the older players, it was almost like if he made his mind up about you that he didn't think you were any good or you couldn't contribute to the team, he would just ride you and spray you. I mean, did you have any similar experiences with
No,
Eddie?
mine was almost the other way. So for me, it was more always keeping me grounded. So where he'd be hard on you, then bring you in, I didn't get that bring me in stage. I just got the be hard, which I needed, because I think from a media point of view, there were a lot of positive things being said about me, and I don't think he wanted, for whatever reason, for that to go to my head. It took him a while to really understand, that those type of things didn't really affect me, and like my work ethic was always something that I tried to pride myself on, but it was definitely a learned skill as well with Eddie. You're constantly always trying to prove yourself each year. Even if you had a good game, I found being in the change room, I couldn't be too happy. Like if I had a good game, or even if I got man of the match and Eddie came in, I'd be like, oh, he's like, Gits, not bad, mate. I said, oh yeah, but I missed maybe that role there. I didn't really fully believe it. I was still happy with the game, but I just felt I always had to prove that I wanted to get better with him. So my experience was a bit different.
He'd always push you in different ways and like teach you in different ways. I remember myself and Quaid as a 9 and 10, so we're 18 years old, and so like we're trying to find our voice and fit into the group. I remember he sat us down after a session. He goes, look, you boys need to talk more, and until you start talking more, this is what you're going to do. And so he'd set up like this 5x5 grid, I think it was at the time. Well, it was about 10 metres long and 5 metres wide, and he got like 4 front rows. Like there's 2 hookers and a couple of props, and there was myself, Quaid, and 2 other young boys, and he goes, "You guys are going to play 4-on-4 full contact after every session until you start talking."
I reckon also he's trying to see if you're tough.
Yeah.
Like if that very first session you start talking straight away, then automatically maybe Eddie's thinking, oh, maybe these boys don't like contact. You know, so there's also like, there's always method in his madness. Like it's not just on the surface sometimes. Like he's such a deep thinker and he's a smart guy. He's been coaching professionally for how long now? So he obviously, you know, he knows what he's doing.
Do you have any like real big sessions? And the reason I ask is I remember that pre-season, we would have these crazy games of 10v10. So we'd start off, we'd do like team v team stuff, whatever, blah, blah. But then he'd break it up and we'd have 10v10, full field for 10 minutes. And then we'd go to a yo-yo test. And then we go back to the 10v10 full field. And like one session we end up having, we were on the coast for a camp and we end up playing 15v15 in like a marked out field on the sand. Like we had some crazy sessions with him.
Yeah, well I think because you had him in Super as well. So for us, anytime I connected back with Eddie, half the season was done. We'd finished Super Rugby, we're in Wallabies. You don't have as long, you don't really have those big pre-season blocks where you do that. It's more, no one felt comfortable. So every session you felt like you had to prove yourself. Every session you're competing, so that when you come to the game, any picture that you've seen or any tough time you've been in, you've already experienced it at training. So he was really good at creating that.
So looking at, obviously he's now come in, new Australia coach. He's got 9 months basically to turn the team into possible World Cup winners. Can he do that?
Yeah, I think so. He wouldn't take the job if he didn't feel like he could do it. And I think 9 months is plenty of time, especially for someone like Eddie. He's constantly getting out. He went out and watched the Sevens. He's already been to Super Rugby. Players know that he's there. So you've got your own coach to play for, but you've now got, instead of being Dave Rennie, they had experience and history with, they've got this new coach and they have no idea how he thinks about them. So they've got to prove themselves again. So I think you're going to get a lift in standard from the players. And the tour last year actually wasn't a bad one. So they lost to Ireland, like they had an opportunity to win. I think at the very end, their maul went down inside their 22 to win the game, who are number 1 in the world. France, when they played them, France were number 1 in the world at the time. Australia were up, they had a chance to win that game, but they didn't close the game out. So they'll take lots of learnings. So if they're in a similar scenario, they'll know now how to close out the game. So they got young guys, lots of talent, and they're not far away. And I think Eddie will put some polishing touches on. I'm not saying that they'll win the World Cup, but I think they'll have the squad and the coaching staff to have an opportunity to win a World Cup.
I think the other thing to note too is if you look at his track record, he's gone into certain environments and made instant impacts and instant change. You look at South Africa, he obviously wasn't the head coach, but he helped South Africa move on to winning the World Cup in 2007. Goes to Japan, they beat South Africa in the UK, and then moving to England, I think they won their first 16 or 17 tests on the trot. So he's got a track record of making an instant impact in the organisations he's a part of.
Suntory as well. When he got moved on from Australia in 2005, he came to Suntory, who were one of the lower ranked teams. You know, they were a weak team consistently fighting. I don't even know if relegation was around, but they're down the bottom. And he changed everything there. It's a culture still that they use Eddie's blueprint, you know, to be competitive every year. So, yeah, I agree. If anyone can change a culture quickly, like in that amount of time, it's Eddie.
Yeah, and he's not obviously just signed a 1-year contract. He's signed 5 years, so 2023 and 2027.
Yeah.
Is he the right man to take 2027?
If I've signed recently to 2027, it's going to be tough. It'll be hard. But, I mean, you need to find other individual motivating factors. Eddie's going to have a plan. He says he's relaxed a lot more with the players. I don't know if he has, but he would need to, I imagine. And I think also probably what helps is that you've got a British and Irish Lions tour in there. So it's almost like you've got a goal. And then in 2 years' time, you've got another really big goal. And then 2 years' time is the next World Cup. So potentially it could be broken up that way.
Yeah, I think the challenging thing for him, whether he has changed, because I think the dynamic of the group now, like if, say, for example, you compare this Wallaby team that we have to a team like England. England have got like hard-nosed, seasoned veteran players, which probably, I think, suit the way Eddie coaches a bit more. I think if he's going to come in and if he's similar to the ways that he was when he was our coach, you just wonder how how that's going to vibe with the current group of, like, the younger generation, obviously a little bit different. So I think he will have to have reinvented himself a little bit. But then also coaches like that can make an immediate impact on culture and the environment. You just wonder sometimes if it's sustainable because they come in with such big personalities. You know, unless I think they're effective in like reinventing themselves and like you were saying, like maybe it's about focusing on the 2-year goals and keeping it fresh that way. It can be a bit draining. So I know he'll make an immediate impact on the team now, but it'll be interesting to see what that looks like moving forward for the next 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
But I think the best coaching setup I had was that, like, it was at the Reds in 2000. I think when Ewan McKenzie was the coach, he was very much the facilitator of the program. Like, he ran the entire program. He was in charge of the culture, the environment, establishing the habits and the rules that he wants in place. But then we had excellent assistants. Jim McKay was our attack coach and Matty Taylor was the defence coach. And he pretty much gave them free rein. Like, he said, you guys run this. And so for us as players, there's no ambiguity. So we know when we want to speak about attack, we go straight to Jimmy. We know when we speak about defence, we go straight to Matty Taylor. And then, I mean, Ewan had the final say over certain things, but he would sort of control when it come to the footy, like the tactical side, saying this is the type of way we want to play. For example, if we're going to play South African teams, we're not kicking the ball out, and if we're going to kick, we're kicking it long. We want to run everything, and then within that, Jimmy would come up with how exactly we wanted to play. Tatsy would come up with exactly how we wanted to defend. I always found that to be the best type of structure because you knew who exactly you wanted to go to speak about certain parts of the game. Don't get me wrong, like guys like Czech and Eddie, I really enjoyed as well. Like, those two are probably the best coaches I've played under. You know, Eddie only had him for a year, but I like the idea of honesty as well, telling you where you need to improve. Like, I think I like that in coaches. I like hard-edged coaches that are just direct, straight, and can sometimes give you a bit of a rev up as well. So, I mean, you're right. Like, different things work for different teams as well.
John Connolly was a bit like that. Like, I remember 2007 World Cup, we played Japan, first game, we won 90-3. And you think 90-3, everyone played well, but I didn't have one of my better games. And then getting showered, getting ready to go on the bus, and he was like, have you seen Matt Giteau? I don't think Matt Giteau made it over to France yet. And it was just like a joking thing to me, and I was like, okay. So I just got on the bus, but, you know, I can be, like, that type of stuff you take to heart because you always want to impress your coach. So then I made sure from then on, like, I prepared properly, and I think we played Wales the next week, and I had a better game, and you can build into it. But I think a lot of those coaches also know, all coaches know certain triggers and how to get the best out of players.
Yeah. So going into that World Cup, 2006, 2007 was pretty successful for you guys. I think you only lost to about 3 different teams. You didn't lose many matches at home. You guys must have been confident going into that tournament. Very
confident. And even throughout the pool stages, I think we beat South Africa at home, New Zealand at home in Melbourne. You know, it was a pretty good test. Leading into, and they were the benchmark into the World Cup, then everything was going super well. Our pool games, we were playing good rugby. The team was getting along super well. The actual World Cup was probably one of the more enjoyable ones I've been involved in. Then the quarterfinal comes around and we're playing England. We should, in our minds, beat them. We had a better team. I thought we were well prepared, and it's just, unfortunately, it was a game that that's also the thing. It doesn't matter what you do in the pool stages. You set yourself up for the best possible draw into the final, but as soon as you lose one game, you're out. So we just had one of the poorer games against England, and that was it.
In 07 for you, Will, obviously you weren't playing for the Wallabies at that stage. You were still a young guy at the Reds. What was it like watching it as a fan and thinking that you could be there one day?
I'll be honest, I didn't watch it.
You wouldn't have. It would have been in France.
Yeah, but I was an All Blacks fan as a kid. I don't think I've ever told anyone that. My first ever jersey was a Crusaders rugby jersey. And even at that stage, I remember watching the 2003 World Cup when the Wallabies won. I was cheering for the All Blacks.
Yeah.
And so, like, having played for the Reds in that year, like, the Wallabies were never on the horizon, so it wasn't something that, that I was focused on. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, well, good. Neither have I. I've never seen it. Yeah, I don't know. It would just sting too much. Even the 2015 World Cup, I couldn't watch that. Yeah, it just hurts too much to watch, I think.
I haven't watched that. I can't watch that. I can't watch my last Test match was England quarterfinal in 2019. You couldn't pay me enough money to sit down and watch that.
No, I reckon they could pay you enough.
No.
Yeah, they're doing it here in Giteau.
Yeah. No, but it's similar to what you're saying. It's too painful. Like to be able to sit down and relive that experience, feeling that you should have gone better. We probably didn't have the best team at that time. Like there's a little bit of instability around our group, but yeah, I mean, still to be able to sit down and watch it and think that was your last Test match was pretty tough. Would be pretty tough.
Were you on the cover of one of the EA Sports rugby games?
Yes, I didn't get a cent for that.
How did that come about?
I don't know. I was on one for when I was at Toulon, but then also for the Wallabies. I don't know. I think that they pick a player, or I don't know how that works.
I've never been on it, so I don't know.
Yeah.
You would have played the games?
No, I didn't. I don't think I was even in the majority of the games. The one in the 2007 or EA, the last one.
Rugby 08.
Rugby 08,
I've heard.
That was the best one.
Yeah, I've heard that's the best one.
I
never really played them. I like NBA.
2K.
2K, yeah.
You an NBA fan?
Yeah.
Who's your team?
Warriors. But have been for a long time, since Chris Mullen. This isn't
Who's
like
Chris Mullen?
Exactly right. Number 17, you wouldn't even know.
You've been a Warriors fan since 2016, I reckon.
Please. Who do you support?
I'm a big KD fan, so I just support wherever he plays. So I was a Brooklyn fan. Now I'm a Phoenix Suns fan.
Oh, of course you are. Yeah.
Yep.
And you're Warriors at that point.
I was.
And then Seattle Supersonics. Did you know he was there? No.
I did.
See, no, you didn't.
Yes,
I
I
could
did.
tell by the way you went.
Yep. I didn't know he was there.
No, OKC is probably when you started.
When he was MVP.
Yeah.
Was
Made
it?
a speech.
His mum was the real
Yeah,
MVP. See, I follow that stuff.
Oh, you follow that stuff. You probably looked at it on Instagram.
All right, let's jump to your first selection in the Wallabies, which we touched on a little bit at the start. But what was that like for you? You know, you hadn't, as you say, been involved in the game for too long, but obviously at a certain point that became a target for you.
Yeah, I remember I had a good season, that 2009 Super Rugby season, but I actually, playing against the Brumbies, I tore the tendon in my finger. And I was out for 3 months, and Robbie Deans called me at the start of that domestic series campaign saying, look, I was going to pick you. So if you can get your rehab right, we'll give you an opportunity. And the Tri-Nations come around, he gave me an opportunity. And we alluded to it earlier, like walking into that environment, you mentioned it a lot, like you kind of feel like you shouldn't be there. And you see all these players like your George Smiths, your Matt Giteaus, your Rocky Elsom, Sterling Mortlock. And the immediate thing that you want to do is to be able to just get on the field and prove yourself. But like when I think back, you were the only bloke that said hello to me actually. When I walked in, like Rocky brushed me, George brushed me.
Was I talking to someone behind you?
You were talking, yeah. Oh, probably. But,
I think it's important to try and make them feel. You want to make them feel welcome, but also you want to seem approachable. I think that was always something that I tried to do. You know, I think I always thought we had a reasonably good culture, but it sounds like it was a bit tougher for you at the start.
No, I mean, the thing is, I don't take those things in a bad way. My immediate thing there was like, well, I got to earn the respect, and I like that. Like I liked that. Like I had to earn the respect of the blokes in the sense that like, if I have to, like I've got to train hard first and foremost, and then I've got to do the shitters, like to carry the bags and things like that. I didn't care about that stuff if it meant that I could earn their respect, because it's like, it's like a rite of passage. Like you have to earn your place before you speak. You have to earn your place before you get spoken to, and I like that. Like for me, I learnt so much in that space, as opposed to coming in and thinking that I should have a voice or thinking that I belong here. But I remember that the feelings. I don't feel like you can ever replicate that feeling like of when I first went in there. It's like you're so excited, but you're so like nervous and scared, and you just want to get on the field and train.
Get your kit.
Get your kit. Like you're like it's Christmas. I remember I grabbed my bags and I was so nervous. I just ran straight up to my room and put it all away. First thing I did was try it all on and think, oh, am I supposed to be wearing this? Like, is this real? But it was, that first camp was incredible.
What was your first test?
It was George Smith's 100th year at Eden Park against the All Blacks.
We were up too.
We were playing well, yeah. I came on, I remember...
We were up by plenty and then we ended up...
Yeah, but I come on for 2 minutes at the end. But I remember, like, as it started getting, like, it was... They told me to warm up at 20 to go. Then it was 15, then it was 10, then it was 5. And I remember thinking, please don't put me on. I don't want to get on. Not because I like...
Because the game was in the balance, or
no,
you wanted to play longer?
No, not at all. I was just, for some reason, as the time went down, I got even more nervous. If I was to go on at 20, like at that point, I was like, oh, I'm going to get in this, I'm going to play. But then it's like, you're on for 2 minutes. If you pass the ball twice, you don't want them to be shit passes.
Yeah.
That type of feeling.
Yeah.
But then I got on, like, I think passed 3 or 4 times, good passes, and got into it.
Yeah, and I mean, George Smith's 100th, he's obviously a guy you have a lot of respect for.
Yeah, massive. I think...
Best player you've played with?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Just more the way he carried himself as well. Like, and he wasn't very fit. Like, wasn't strong. Like, he was strong, but he's just footy strong, and he was footy fit. But in all the testings, like, everyone used to call him like the ninth wonder of the world because his body was disgusting. You get his shirt off, and you're just like, how does this guy play as well as he does? Like, a lot of the boys would do that, but he's a good fella. Like, as soon as the game was over, he's straight in, having a few beers. He would go very hard like that, and he'd be so inclusive with young guys, older guys, could mix with everyone. But then when Monday came, he switched back on, he trained hard. I remember even little things at Brumby's training that people would pick up. So they'd practice scrumming, just like either against each other or like a scrum, the scrum machine. And every time they'd say stop, like as in to break the scrum, stop the pushing, George would run off like a couple of metres, 4 metres, almost like game-like. So he's just creating good habits. Like just small stuff like that I just really admired about him. And then in a game, he could see the same vision as a back. He could see where the ball needed to go, but also he did a lot of the tough stuff.
My first spring tour, that 2009 spring tour, I remember we did the 3K time trials. You boys were all at the front, others like more towards the back. And I remember George Smith, we had a prop at the time, Celestia Murphy's about 140 kilos. George actually...
Gee, Bopper won't be happy to hear that. 130, I'd say.
Yeah, 130,
140
we'll round up.
About twice well.
Yeah. But George actually finished behind him in that 3K time trial. But then when we went on the spring tour, like to what Matt was saying there, like he's everywhere on the field. He just had this level of anticipation about the game, this vision. And yeah, like those sorts of guys, they may not be fit in the testing, but they'll run all day on the field. And
he just couldn't care less about testing. Yeah. That's the thing. So it's almost like, oh, it hurts a little bit, I might stop, But if you knew George, you knew that, say we did game fitness, he would probably be everywhere, and his meters would be a bit higher. He was just someone that needed that competition, I think, to really have a crack.
One of the frustrating things about him, like George being that good, like he never showed any kind of emotion on the field. Like, players who are that good, they like to talk shit, they like to give you a bit of a spray. He would just do his job, and it used to frustrate you. But he's also,
you know why? Because he wasn't that smart. He's not witty. George isn't witty. I sprayed him once in a game. I don't know what I said. I bagged him because we used to room together with Wallabies early on. You'd share like a communal room. And I sprayed him, I don't know what I said. I said, maybe that white colour's no good for you. You got your guts hanging out or something. And he was just staring at me. And after the game, I said, we all right, George? You're fine? He said, oh, yeah, I just couldn't think of anything to say back. Like, he's just not witty. So it wasn't nothing to do with, like, him copying it. He just, I think he just knew his place and just stayed there.
Well, I can't ever remember or imagine spraying him on the field. I just would always look at him doing these amazing things, and he just would never layer up or anything like that. And you're just frustrated. You're like, how can you be that fucking good? And
how does he, you didn't play with Richie McCaw.
Yep.
How does a guy like George Smith compare to Richie McCaw?
Oh, I play with George.
Nah, tell the truth. You had a go at Richie off air. You were spraying him, saying he wasn't that good.
What? Listen.
Come on, Matthew.
We actually can't do this. Like, he's trying to create a joke here, and this is something that's going to go. It's a bit of clickbait.
Right, fair enough.
He's doing a bit of clickbait here.
Fair enough.
I didn't say that. No, but to me, George is he could do everything. Like, George is my favourite. I know it might not be popular. Like, Richie will go down as one of the greatest ever. Like,
How do you reckon they were different?
No, I just think the sad part for George is he never won a World Cup, and it's almost like the NBA, you judge on championships. George came just at the back end, like he played the Lions series, and he was part of that and won that. People quickly forget that, but he was involved in winning Bledisloe Cups, but he never won a World Cup, unfortunately. So he got a silver in 2003, then 2007, we got knocked out in the quarters. So individually, as a player, like as I said before, I think he's probably the greatest player I played with.
Yeah. And going to that 2007 onwards period after John Connolly and Robbie Deans coming in.
Yep.
What were your experiences like with him?
There's no secret that we didn't gel well. I think the biggest problem that we face, I never spoken to him about it or really spoken to him, but the culture that I grew up in was like, if something was presented, the senior players, on behalf of the younger guys, to give clarity and whatever else, you would challenge the coach just to see why we do this type of game plan. Not really to challenge the coach or undermine him, but it was just to get the understanding so that then you could feed it on to the boys when you're on the field. And potentially Robbie maybe saw that as I was challenging him or undermining him in front of the younger guys. I remember very early on him saying that I'm too hard on the younger guys, we've got to let them flourish, make them feel like they belong here. But the way I learnt when I first came in, especially about standards, expectations, being on time, at training, if you miss your role, that's not good enough. You need to know your role, you need to know your detail. I used to get screamed at if I didn't know my stuff. So I'd make sure that night I'd know my plays, know what I need to do next day for training. So when the older players moved on, I felt like that was my responsibility to drive standards. And he was saying that, potentially I was a little hard on those guys. So I felt like you lose your voice and automatically everyone's on the same level. So I just found, I don't know, it's just like a lot of culture, a lot of things were changed in that Wallaby environment around that time, which I found hard to adjust.
But do you think there's got to be a balance there where, like, you've probably got to give a bit as well? Or is it like, no, I'm not saying that you work.
No. What do you mean?
Well, like, he obviously, being the head coach, wanted it to be that way.
Yep.
Do you think that maybe you were a little bit stuck in your ways and could have been a bit more giving in terms of what he was asking for from you? And I'll say...
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. He's the coach.
Maybe in hindsight.
Well, yeah, ultimately he's the coach. But I'd been... Yeah, and this is probably the other thing. When I started getting dropped and not picked in the team, I asked him, like, before one of the tests, and this when I knew that things were starting to go a bit sour and I was out, I just said, like, is there anything you want me to work on? After the Super Rugby season, I was like, is there anything you want me to work on to improve? And he was like, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I was 28 at the time, maybe 29, but then not given any tools to work on, I kind of took that as a sign, okay, well, I'm kind of on the out, and I did feel a little bit disconnected from the group, but 100%, like, I think he's the coach. I'd only experienced one way, and that one way had been successful with the Wallabies, so I thought that was the only way. I'd not been shown another way, and a new coach has come in, and I probably didn't give the way I should have. When I got dropped, I probably reacted a bit like a brat, I think, spoilt in hindsight. But off the back of that, getting rejected from the Wallabies and then heading over to Toulon, not as the player that they signed a Wallaby, Matt Giteau. When I got over there, I was rejected, Matt Giteau. So for me, I had a really big, like, pre-season, maybe 10-week pre-season in Australia to make sure it was almost like the start of my career again, where I had to reprove myself and show that I could still compete and play well for Toulon. So it actually helped me a lot getting dropped, and that reality check was really good for me, and it extended my career another 10 years.
I remember I learned, like, I learned a lot off yourself and Digby Ioane. I remember in 2009, which was the year that I eventually made it into the Wallaby squad, he was our best player at the Reds year before he'd won the Stan Pilecki medal. And then I remember in 2009, I was watching him train. After every training session, he'd always do fitness extras. And it dawned on me in one particular moment, I was like, this bloke's our best player. And he's playing currently for the Wallabies. Yet he's the only person doing extras after training. And so I thought to myself, well, I'm going to just jump in with him and see how I go. And at the start, like, he would do, I don't know what it is, I can't remember the time, but it was like hundreds or 150s. Like, he'd be beating me by a good 30 or 40 metres. But then by the end of that season, I'm keeping up with him. And I ended up getting called into the Wallabies. And then same thing with, I remember there was a time in the gym where we were doing chin-ups. And I'd done a couple of reps, and I think on one of them I hadn't got my chin completely over the bar, and he's standing behind me going, come on, mate, no shortcuts.
Yeah, 3.5.
3.5, yeah.
He's counting 4.
Yeah.
Well, those guys that get off, I can bench 140, but they just do half reps. It's almost like, well, why don't you just do 4 full reps at 120? But with Digby, I had him at the Force, and he before he went back to the Reds, and he was someone after training, I'd see him doing fitness extras, and I'm like, there's no way I'm going to let him be like fitter than me. So we just kill ourselves on after the training session. Like, you be training, but as I'm training, I'm thinking, oh shit, I still got to run with Digby after this.
I remember, like, you're talking about your strength was your fitness. Mine was always, I was real strong in the gym.
Yeah, very strong.
Real strong in the
Remember
gym.
you benched like a 172 once?
Yeah.
Awesome.
But speaking of bench, speaking about bench, I remember one time I was doing bench at the Reds, and I remember Sammy Cordingley said to me one time, yeah, it'd be pretty good if you could bench press on the field. And I took it as a bit of a slight, but then I also
You know why? Because he could only bench 60.
Yeah.
So it's almost like justification for
Yeah.
him.
But then I also took it as a slight, but then I took it in a way of thinking, maybe he's right, like, maybe I just need to be fitter. And it actually pushed me to focus a little bit more on the fitness stuff. And then obviously doing that stuff with diggers and closet training, like you said, I remember when I first started, because I wanted to get fit, like we would train, and then I'd go to like a field near my house and turn my car lights on and just do extra running. Because I knew I was strong, I knew I had good skills, but I knew if I wanted to be able to play at a high level and play consistently well, I'd have to run like Gits, I'd have to run like diggers, I'd have to run like those boys and be fit in that sense.
You'd have to push your car home too if you left the battery,
Nah,
the lights on.
20, 25 minute sessions, they weren't too bad.
172, Will, benched.
Mm.
Not bad. How did that happen?
You know, it's actually accidental. I was with Digby. Digby had just benched 180. And I'd asked him to take off, I think, 15 kilos at the time, and I don't think he can count. He still can't count.
Yeah.
And
I don't think either of you could.
Yeah, well, I couldn't, obviously, as well. I still did. I just trusted him. And then I lifted it up, I think, twice. And then he was like, good lift, bro, good lift. And I was like, yeah. And then I ended up getting off counting, and it was 172.
Yeah, I remember looking at it, I was going, wow, that's, for such a little man, that's pretty impressive. Yeah, I remember him being super strong on the bench. You still bench like that?
I can get up to sets of like 4 or 5 on 160. I was always naturally like quite strong, so I was lucky in that space. But what about guys? Remember guys like Tatafu, because he was so big, and he put on muscles so quickly. He wouldn't do gym.
Well, 2 years sober, they had to stop him doing gym.
Because he just get too big.
Too big. He put on 18 kilos in his 6-month our pre-season from when I first got to Toulon to when we had to start. But he'd even be going, we said, okay, max bench. And he'd just be there smiling, he'd just push 180. And I was like, you can go more. He says, no, that's too heavy. And I was like, mate, that flew up. But he just, like, naturally,
Marika's the same. Like when I was at the Rebels, Marika, at that stage I wasn't lifting as much. I'd do 140 like 4 or 5 times, and like by the end of it I'm like struggling. Marika just come in and just power it up as if it was like 60 kilos.
On the flip side of that, I got Drew to come to Toulon, Drew Mitchell. So I said, yeah, he's a good player, like, you know, we want him. Obviously, you can see what he can do internationally as a footballer. They said, okay. So he got in, but he's not someone that's super motivated by himself to train, and he'd not touched many weights. He got over there and he failed on 70 kilos, the bench press. And the Toulon boys were looking at me going, are you, who is this guy that you brought over? I said, just give him a bit of time, please, he'll get to shape. Anyway, he got there.
What did he get up to?
Oh, I don't know, 75 or something. no, he got to pretty decent.
You're doing him dirty here.
No, but he got to decent. He's always been a good squatter, but bench has never been his strong point. But at Toulon, like, especially, you know, early on, those things matter. You know, what can you bench, what can you squat, because he'd not played footy at that point. So it wasn't a good start.
Towards the end of, obviously, that 4-year period, you fell out a little bit with Robbie.
Yeah.
What was sort of the year leading up to that World Cup like for you?
Well, I didn't really play any of I think it was still Tri-Nations then. I played the Samoa game, and then, yeah, he told me that I wasn't involved in the World Cup. Basically, yeah, flew me up from Canberra and just said, we're going for a 17-13 split, so 17 forwards, 13 backs. You're not included. I was like, okay. I said, well, why did you fly me up? Because the whole squad was in there and everyone else was getting announced, and they were all quite happy, and I felt really embarrassed. And I said, well, why'd you fly me out? And he said, well, out of respect, you know, I thought, you know, to tell you in person would be the thing to do. I said, well, if it's respect, then why is the strapping guys coming in and out? Why are we not in a room by ourselves? I don't know. I'm not saying, like, I know I reacted poorly, but I was just like, I was super embarrassed, and it'll be the first time, you know, I'd been left out of a squad, so I probably didn't react the right way. But yeah, that was it. And then he had me booked to fly out the next day. And that night they were having like a congratulations dinner together. And I was roomed with one of the players, with Digby, where he was getting ready to go to the dinner that I wasn't going to. So I was like, mate, I need to just get out of here. Can you change my flight? So I flew out that night, went back home and had a few vodkas with my brother.
Japan, that's where we are now, obviously.
Yep.
And what brought you here in the first place?
Closer to home. My son, elder son, he refused to speak French. So if the gardener would talk to him, like, hi, how are you in French, he'd just go, oh, didn't want to hear it. But then his English was also bad. So we'd come, and where we lived, you could see the ocean. And we'd come over the hill and he'd go, oh, look, la 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 la, is how he'd say water. I looked at my wife, I said, this is not right. Like he's, I don't know what he's speaking here. So we knew that eventually we're going to live in Australia. So yeah, it would just, I still had another year to go in my Toulon contract, which I had to pay Morad to get out of. That was part of the contract, I don't know how that worked. But I rang Eddie Jones and I was like, I don't have much time because I had to let Morad know by a certain time. So is there a spot for me at Suntory? And Eddie got it done in like 12 hours.
And what about you, Will? You're obviously over here now.
I'd left Paris, Stade Francais, to go back to the Rebels in 2018 and 2019. Czech was keen on me getting back there to be able to prepare for the World Cup in 2019. And at the end of that 2019 season, like you just get to a point where you mentally you need something different. And I felt like I'd played super at that stage, I don't know for however many years, and the competition wasn't as exciting for me anymore. And so the opportunity came to come over here in Japan and something different, something still close to home, like good money obviously as well, and just a different culture. Like I enjoyed Paris because it was something different, and I just felt it would be another type of adventure to come here. And you always hear about the fact that the people are so lovely and welcoming, and the food's good, and the experience since I've been here has been incredible.
However, you've been here how
long? 4 years.
Yesterday was the first time that he's had sushi in Japan.
Yes.
Like you talk about the food's great. What food? What are you eating? Hamburgers.
Mate, Japanese
McDonald's
food
is great.
Yeah.
Japanese food isn't just sushi.
Yeah, I know, but it's a big part of it.
What's your favourite Japanese food?
I'm a big fan of I like the way they do their chicken teriyaki here.
Yeah.
I enjoy that.
Chicken teriyaki.
But also, they do the rice balls are really good here from 7-Eleven.
Yep. So that's the height of Japanese cuisine.
Yeah, so how was Japan? Well, yeah, went to 7-Eleven, got a rice ball.
Mate, there's a bunch of different types of food that I've eaten.
Okay.
But
Mexican?
I will say, yeah, Mexican in Japan.
In Japan.
Best restaurant here. I will say he took me to a good sushi restaurant in Tokyo.
Yes.
First time I'd had it in was.
That's when he told me. He said, "You know, this is the first time I've had sushi in Japan." I said, "But do you like sushi?" He's like, "Yeah, I smash it all the time at home."
What I mean, what for you guys when you first arrived here? Obviously, you've been here 4 years now.
Yeah.
You had quite a few years here.
Yep.
What were the biggest surprises?
I think for me, like they love rules, and they will never break them. Like a simple experience of like crossing the road, it could be midnight, and there's no cars going on the road, and that no one will cross. They'll wait for the light to go green. Just simple things like that.
Yeah.
And this might sound silly, but like the fact that you can pay all your bills at like a 7-Eleven or like a Lawson, like just a convenience store. Real simple with different things like that I found a little bit interesting.
The way that they just jam everyone into a train, it's almost like a game of Tetris, where you can get in, you don't think there's a spot, but then someone will get in and then manoeuvre themselves around, and they can fit in. I kind of enjoy watching that. The first time I had a scooter, I went on a highway. You're not supposed to do that. Apparently it's only cars are allowed on highway, but my GPS showed me to go this certain way. Yeah. And again, rule-based society, there were 4 cops that just came, police people just came, blocked me in. I'm thinking, what have I done here? Like what? So just little things like that, like whereas if that was in France, I would say, oh, it's okay, yep, shouldn't be on the highway, no worries, I'll just go down and get off. They're like, no, you've done the wrong thing now, so you're gonna have to walk your bike. So went down, walked my bike. They followed me to the clubhouse, and this was my first. Obviously, you're representing your company there, so that wasn't a great introduction. And when I got to fuel up the bike, so the signs are written in Japanese, but they're just color-coded. So I'm looking at it. There's no one there to help me because it was early in the morning, so I've just had a guess. Filled it up with red, waiting for it to blow up, but I got there. So then I knew red was the one for me. Just lots of those little things. I just reckon that's why you're here. The best advice I got was when I first left Australia to go to France, they said, don't compare this country to home. Otherwise, you're going to get frustrated. Just take it for what it is and enjoy the experience.
It's the other thing interesting about here, like how big reputation is. Like playing for you're playing for a rugby team, but essentially it's part of a company. Like Suntory, like Kintetsu, Panasonic. Like the reputation of the company far outweighs anything that happens in the rugby department. So, I mean, you've seen clubs here get shut down because of drug scandals and things to do in bars and wrecking places, and people lose their jobs because you just get caught out on something minor with the police.
Yeah.
I was at a barbecue about to meet the boys when I first got here, and I just took a couple of cans, couple of beers to go, drove there, and just cracked one open. And one of the Japanese, well, he was foreigner, but he spoke Japanese, and he was like, "What are you doing with that? You drove here, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "It's all right. I only have a couple, and then I'll cruise back." They said, "No. Like it's got to be zero, whereas you have to." Zero is what you're allowed to blow. And if I got pulled over by the police, not knowing, but I potentially could have cost everyone in the club their jobs.
Yeah.
So it's just small things like that you, it's almost like you need a handbook at the very start, because had this guy not been invited to the barbecue, I potentially could have shut down all of Suntory.
Yeah, reputation's huge. And you told a story like they told you have to have like even Suntory beers.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you can't
Yeah,
have
in my fridge I just bought a whole lot of another brand. I won't say it because I love Suntory, but I had another brand of different beer. Boys came over that worked for Suntory because we were going to watch a test match. They opened the fridge and there was another brand of beer there. They didn't have it. They sat there and had water.
Yeah, and there's this interesting culture here where a lot of fans will show up to training as well, just to catch a glimpse of you guys.
With gifts.
Yeah.
Yeah. Often I get a little Starbucks free coffee gift, and they're unbelievable. Like just nice, super friendly. Yeah, and just loyal. Yeah, great fans.
Yeah, I've got birthday cards here. Like here, I've got chocolates. Like they've given me.
Are they the Kit Kat? That
Yeah,
matcha Kit Kat?
yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping you wouldn't buy those.
No. Well, you're gonna have some after, sure.
I don't like that type of flavour. That's why I was hoping you didn't buy them.
No, but then they bring you like photos, like framed photos from like games in your career, and they've given me stuff for my daughter, like presents for my daughter. Yeah,
they're
just
very thoughtful.
Yeah, they're very thoughtful. Like just incredibly respectful as well. Like even when they want to come and ask you for a signature, if you say that you're tired or you've got to go in rush.
Oh, you're the big dog. I would never say that. I'd sign it.
No. But what I'm saying is like they're just incredibly respectful. You know, unlike Matt. You know.
Well, unlike you, by the sounds of things.
Nah, trust me.
Where are you going? You got no one here. You're by yourself.
He hasn't changed this bloke. I feel like we're on the Wallaby bus again, and he's sitting behind me spraying me.
You got to keep.
He's a good bloke. He's a good bloke. He teaches
Coach
a
isn't
lot.
going to drop you today, Gits. You're all good.
Yeah.
You're safe.
Are you
This
the
is a safe
coach?
spot.
Yeah. Are you my coach?
Someone out there's coach. Have you had any particularly strange interactions with fans?
The strangest I'd say, which isn't a bad thing, is they'll ask, most of the time when people ask you to take photos, it's a selfie, or they'll give someone a camera, but they'll ask you to take a photo and they say, "Oh no, just you," and you just stand there and they take
an individual one,
an individual photo. You can't.
Yeah.
I always think to myself, what do I do with my hands? Do I cross my hands? Do I do this? And it's pretty uncomfortable. But yeah, that's like even then, it's like they're so polite. They're just asking you, "Can I please have a photo?" But yeah, it can be a bit uncomfortable when you're just standing there by yourself taking a photo.
Thank you very much.
No, all
First
good.
episode ticked off.
Tick. Sorry about Will.
What are you sorry for?
Oh, just your performance.
My performance.
Yeah. Anyway. Yep,
Well, can I just say,
wrap it up?
I'm still
We'll wrap it up. You're not allowed to say anything.
I'm still playing
Move
footy,
on.
so I've got stuff that I've got to concentrate on. You're doing nothing with your life now, so you just you can be as prepared as you
What about
possibly
my
can.
poor kids? Anyway.
All right, we happy? We good?
Yeah. Something.
Mama.